Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Radcliffe Day. Today, we get to pay tribute to a towering institution in higher education. And Dr. Simmons, congratulations on earning the prestigious Radcliffe Medal, a well-deserved recognition of a life devoted to service, to scholarship, and to stewardship of some of the finest universities in our nation. But it wasn't an easy path to get here. Before she was Dr. Simmons, she was just Ruth, the daughter of a sharecropper and descendant of slaves, the youngest of 12 growing up in an East Texas town, a little girl who didn't even realize college was an option for her until one perceptive teacher set her straight. And thank goodness she did. Dr. Simmons has molded the minds of generations of students, equipping them to discover their talents and chase their dreams. Along the way, she blazed a trail for women of color in academia, rising to become the first Black president of an Ivy League school. That meant Dr. Simmons spent most of her career in rooms with few, if any, others who looked like her. So it would have been safer to play nice and not rock the boat. But that's just not who Dr. Simmons is. She refused to be content with just earning her place within these institutions. She wanted to challenge them to be better too. At Brown, she led what would become a nationwide reckoning over the role of slavery in institutions of higher education, adamant that universities hold themselves accountable, because Dr. Simmons knew that universities are built on the pursuit of truth, that anything less than that would desecrate the purpose and promise of higher education. It's no wonder her students endearingly called her Ruth the Truth. In this precarious moment, as higher education and history itself is under siege, Dr. Simmons is precisely the character and caliber of leader that we must look toward. Her inspiring leadership and legacy should remind us all about the transformative power our institutions hold, the kind that changed the life of a little girl from East Texas, and along with it, a responsibility to use that power to stand for what's right. That's what she has done over her entire career, and in doing so, she has paid back that teacher who believed in her all those years ago in kind. So, Dr. Simmons, congratulations again on this incredible achievement. And on behalf of the countless women, and men too, whose chance at chasing their dreams was made possible by your courage and determination, thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, and we're so grateful to Michelle Obama for helping us celebrate Ruth Simmons. I'm delighted now to begin the keynote portion of Radcliffe Day 2026, and as I do so, please enjoy your lunch. Let me start with some welcomes and well wishes. First, congratulations to the Harvard class of 2026. Let's give them a round of applause. And of course, we're thrilled to be joined by so many Radcliffe alumnae. Let me extend special congratulations to those celebrating reunions this year, particularly members of the class of 1976 who are celebrating their milestone 50th anniversary reunion. The legacy of Radcliffe College continues to animate our work, and I'm so grateful to our alumni community for their dedication to the Institute and for being with us today. Thank you so much. I'd also like to recognize President Alan Garber and Provost John Manning, who are both joining us today. We're also joined by a number of other special guests. I'm pleased to extend a warm welcome to President Emeritus Lawrence Bacow and Adele Bacow. President Emerita Drew Gilpin-Faust and Charles Rosenberg. deans from across the university, members of the Harvard Corporation and the Board of Overseers, and our 2012 Radcliffe Medalist, the Honorable Margaret Marshall. Thank you all for being here today. I'd also like to warmly welcome generous supporters of the Radcliffe Institute. We have members of the Radcliffe Institute Dean's Advisory Council and the Schlesinger Library Council joining us today. None of our work would be possible without the dedication and the generosity of our Advisory Council members, and we thank you. I'm also grateful to members of the Radcliffe Institute Leadership Society, the Anne Radcliffe Society, and Radcliffe Associates. And thank you to all of our annual donors who make our work possible. Finally, I'm very pleased to welcome Radcliffe Fellows and Radcliffe-affiliated students joining us today. Thank you for being with us. And now it's my distinct honor on behalf of Harvard Radcliffe Institute to recognize Ruth J. Simmons as our 2026 Radcliffe Medalist. With courage and integrity, Ruth Simmons embodies extraordinary and transformative leadership in higher education. Throughout her distinguished career, she has been a tireless champion of education and its distinct capacity to empower individuals and serve society. Ruth's own past was shaped by education. She, in turn, dedicated her life to expanding access and opportunity for others, driven by her fierce conviction that, quote, education makes possible the smoothing out of unequal circumstances into which many are born. Ruth's leadership is singular. As the path-breaking president of a women's college, an Ivy League university, and an historically Black university, she has had a transformational impact on institutions that reflect the breadth of American colleges and universities and the students that they serve. She has always recognized the excellence found in every community and has worked to remove what she's described as the, quote, artificial barriers that separate higher education. She has consistently and fearlessly challenged universities to live up to their highest ideals, motivated by her powerful, affirmative vision of the role universities can and must play in a democratic society. We have an opportunity in universities, Ruth said here at Radcliffe some years ago. If we can lead with vision and integrity, she continued, tomorrow is going to be stronger because we have held to our values and promoted the best that we can do as human beings in reaching across difference and in solving problems together. Ruth Simmons was born in 1945 near Grapeland, Texas, a time and place at a crossroads in history, as she wrote in her moving memoir, Up Home. Ruth's great-grandparents had been enslaved, and their descendants sought opportunity in the face of segregation as it became codified across the American South. To be born in an environment in which one is legally designated subhuman, Ruth wrote with striking clarity, is a defining experience. Ruth's parents, Fanny and Isaac Stubbefield, labored as sharecroppers. As the youngest of their 12 children, Ruth accompanied her parents and siblings as they farmed the fields. Under the sharecropping system, ours was subsistence living at best, she's explained. When Ruth was 7, the family left that life behind to build a new one in Houston's 5th Ward. In the Texas of Ruth's childhood in the 1940s and 1950s, segregation imposed a separate and profoundly unequal status on African Americans. Reflecting on her youth, Ruth wrote, I was aware that being Black enclosed me in a web of stereotypes that I would not likely escape. That these conditions did not circumscribe her future was, in her telling, a result of the people and the community that shaped her. Then as now, her close, loving family was central. Ruth has said of her mother, Fanny, "She taught me that I was worth something and that caring for others, irrespective of their circumstances, was one of the most important things that I could do." Fanny died when Ruth was only 15, and her example remains Ruth's North Star. Every day, Ruth has said, "I try to be worthy of the kind of person my mother wanted me to be." Ruth was also shaped by her teachers, whom she credits with nourishing her love of learning and demonstrating what she's described as the simple premise that the life and exercise of the mind bestow enormous power and promise. These educators challenged Ruth and her classmates to aspire to great things, offering their students hope that the future could be brighter than the present. Their example inspired Ruth to become an educator. An exceptional student, Ruth graduated as salutatorian from Phyllis Wheatley High School in 1963. She earned a scholarship and, with her teachers and siblings' steadfast support, enrolled at Dillard University, an historically Black institution in New Orleans. At Dillard, Ruth studied languages and literature. It was a time of great possibility, yet she's also spoken of this period as one framed by violence, as the nonviolent civil rights movement reshaped American law and society in the face of violent backlash. "I knew only one thing to do," she concluded, "to keep studying, to grow stronger in my desire to do good, to embrace difference, and to never forget the price paid for the benefits that I enjoyed." Ruth studied abroad in Mexico and France, and she spent her junior year at Wellesley College. "I fell in love with ideas," she said. "I wanted to know something about the world." She ultimately decided to become a scholar, seeing in university life a unique space to pursue knowledge and, above all, truth. Ruth graduated from Dillard summa cum laude in 1967, having already secured admission and funding for graduate school through a Danforth Fellowship. She first went to France on a Fulbright, then served for a time as an interpreter at the State Department before ultimately enrolling at Harvard to pursue her PhD in Romance languages and literatures. At Harvard, Ruth encountered skepticism and what she describes as a place steeped in others' traditions that I could not easily access. She was undeterred and graduated in 1973. Ruth became an assistant professor of French at the University of New Orleans before moving into university administration in 1975. She's explained, "If education could eradicate the many constraints of my early life, it could also be the answer to advancing the well-being of millions. Fighting for that idea became the focus of my work in the academy." Over the next 20 years, she held increasingly senior roles, including at California State University, Northridge, the University of Southern California, Spelman College, and Princeton University. Then, as now, legacies of exclusion lingered in her education, including along lines of race and ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status. Ruth worked tirelessly to confront these legacies. Reflecting on those years, she's recalled, "A lot of what I was trying to do is to demonstrate how impoverished the reasoning is for excluding people. I've tried in my career to push against those conventions that keep us from honestly assessing people's work and their potential." Those are watchwords for our time. In 1995, Ruth was appointed the 9th president of Smith College. There, she demonstrated the skill and strategic vision that would come to define all of her presidencies. Under Ruth's leadership, Smith bolstered its curriculum, expanded offerings in the humanities, established the first engineering program at an American women's college, and launched Praxis, a program through which all Smith students have the opportunity to complete an internship funded by the college. In 2001, Ruth became the 18th president of Brown University and the first African American to lead an Ivy League institution. Across her storied 11-year tenure, Ruth transformed Brown's academic and research programs and expanded access and opportunity for students of all backgrounds. Through her plan for academic enrichment, Ruth improved Brown's facilities and expanded its faculty and research enterprise. Under her leadership, the university also introduced curricular innovations, strengthened financial aid, and established a need-blind admissions policy. To accomplish all of this, Ruth led what was then the largest fundraising campaign in Brown's history, raising more than $1.6 billion. She achieved all of this while leading Brown through crises that shook the university and the world, including the September 11th terror attacks and the 2008 financial crisis. She also led the university through the difficult yet vital process of reckoning with painful aspects of its own history. In 2003, Ruth established a steering committee on slavery and justice to answer persistent questions about the university's historical ties to slavery. That decision garnered praise in some quarters, skepticism in others, and some strong, even threatening opposition. But for Ruth, the way forward was obvious. A simple question needed to be met with a straightforward answer, she said. Our commitment to truth and to the fearless exchange of ideas demands nothing less. Brown became one of the first universities to acknowledge formally its ties to slavery, and its Committee on Slavery and Justice became a model for institutions around the world, including this one. Reflecting on the effort's impacts years later, Ruth has said, "We have to work to do in a university that is so important to the advancement of society. If we shirk that responsibility, shame on us." Ruth stepped down as president of Brown in 2012, intending to retire. But when Prairie View A&M University called 5 years later, she answered. She later remarked, "How could I turn away from doing for other young people what was done for me?" Making history once more, Ruth became the first woman to serve as president of that eminent, historically Black university. With vision, principle, and a keen capacity for problem solving, Ruth led Prairie View as it extended its research activity, attained the R2 Carnegie classification, and increased its endowment by some 40%. Ruth oversaw the creation of an African American Studies program, the Toni Morrison Writing Program, and the Prairie View School of Public and Allied Health. When COVID-19 struck, Ruth established a grant fund to help pay educational expenses for juniors and seniors facing financial hardship, and she established Prairie View's Center for Race and Justice, which is now named in Ruth's honor, as is the prominent Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice at Brown. Ruth is undoubtedly one of the most respected and consequential higher education leaders of our time. Her achievements have been recognized with too many honors to recount, among them the National Humanities Medal and the French Legion of Honor, awarded for, quote, Ruth's unwavering commitments to education, knowledge, justice, and human dignity. I think it's fair to say, Harvard President Emeritus Lawrence Bacow once remarked, that the world of higher education and society at large would not be the same without Ruth. He went on, "To the extent that we have made progress on a number of important issues, we've done so through the leadership of Ruth Simmons." Princeton University President Chris Eisgruber praised Ruth as being among the greatest leaders in higher education with extraordinary ability to encourage and inspire people and institutions to become the best possible versions of themselves. She is passionate, she is dedicated, and she is tireless, he concluded. Toni Morrison once described Ruth as a bit of a miracle, with an unusual combination of real politics and integrity and this very keen sense of morals. Reflecting on Ruth's path to leadership, Morrison observed, to have someone come from those circumstances is to have someone who knows what power is for, enabling people. That Ruth has used the prominence of her positions to empower others is clear from the deep respect and affection she inspires from students. Students have elevated her to cult status, noted the Brown student newspaper, complete with Ruth-inspired t-shirts and performances. Prairie View students praised her energy and authenticity and dubbed her Ruth the Truth, as Michelle Obama noted. Ruth has said that her life's work was, quote, always about leading young people to a place where they could maximize their talents and their intelligence and aspire to be whole beings that will add something to the world. Like her own teachers before her, Ruth's message to young people is one of possibility and hope. Whatever the circumstances of their lives, she writes, they are born not to be the person that history, limited resources, and others dictate, but rather the person that they are willing to pour their heart and soul into becoming. I am honored to recognize Ruth Simmons today. And now I'm pleased to introduce this afternoon's keynote conversation between Ruth and Harvard President Emerita Drew Gilpin Faust. Drew was both the founding dean of the Radcliffe Institute and the first woman to serve as president of Harvard University. A distinguished historian, she is the Arthur Kingsley Porter University Research Professor and the author of 7 books, including This Republic of Suffering, Death and the American Civil War, which won the Bancroft Prize and was a National Book Award and Pulitzer Prize finalist. Her most recent book is a memoir titled Necessary Trouble, Growing Up at Mid-Century. Drew is the recipient of numerous honors, including the 2018 John Kluge Prize for Achievement in the Study of Humanity from the Library of Congress. Thank you, Drew, for being here, and now it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Ruth J. Simmons and Drew Gilpin Faust to the stage.
What an honor it is to be here on the stage with Ruth Simmons, and what a joy it is to be here today with all of you. There's so much to celebrate this week here at Harvard, and today and this moment are something to celebrate so enthusiastically. As we hear the story of Ruth's life, it just is so uplifting and so inspiring. And now we've heard that you are a franchise player and a few other, an icon, all these wonderful words. And now you get a chance to use your voice to tell us who you are. So in the next few minutes, I hope we will have a wonderful time doing that together. I'd like to start at the beginning. Raphael Bostic said leadership begins at home. So tell us a little bit about those beginning years in Texas. You said, in your commencement address here at Harvard a few years ago that you grew up on a diet of Jim Crow. Tell us a bit about what that was like.
Well, ordinarily, first of all, Drew, thank you so much for doing this. It's a pleasure to see you. And I admire you so much, your leadership over the years. Although it's not a happy circumstance to talk about those difficult days, but with young people not having any sense of where this country has come from, I feel obligated to talk about it. What was it like? Well, first of all, there was such manifest general agreement in this country that if you were Black, you had no right to see yourself as a citizen of this country. You were at best relegated to bestial type work. You certainly had no intelligence, and you were undeserving of common courtesies and respect. And so as a child, I grew up understanding that I was separate from, different from, less than the whites in our community in East Texas. And what that meant is that there were certain behaviors that we were obligated to follow. And our parents were wonderful in teaching us how to behave, because if you failed to behave correctly, you could be summarily punished and then sometimes killed. And so they would tell us, when you are in town, step off the sidewalk when a white person is coming. Don't go into stores. Don't talk to white people in an aggressive way. And so they gave us a lesson in subservience, basically, which of course I didn't learn very well, but still, in those days I adhered to that, as all of us did. And so we survived that very difficult and brutal period. You know, Drew, we are so connected in this country, even though we dismiss our relationship to each other, that when my book came out, a young woman contacted me and identified herself as my cousin. She happened to be white. And she wondered if it might be possible for us to have a family reunion, the white members of the family and the Black members of the family. I was floored by that. Now this is 2025, okay, before it happens. When I go to my siblings and I say, you'll never imagine what happened, this white girl has told me that they now want to embrace us as members of the family, and they want to have a family reunion. Well, my siblings were, to a person, enraged by the idea, of course, because after all, if we were rejected before, why should we now be willing to do that? My reaction was different. I thought, well, this is manifestly evidence of the kind of evolution that takes place. And therefore, I thought we should do it. I have never wanted to spend my life being angry about that era, but so many people I know lived that anger, died with it, and passed it on to their children. I'm determined not to do that, because what will we be as a country if we hold on to that? We need to move on.
So, definite applause line. I'm so interested that you have moved back to Texas, though, and that to me symbolizes a confrontation with your past, a transcendence of your past, a celebration of a different element of your childhood. She was even recently the Grand Marshal of the Peanut Parade. Was that your title? Yeah. So she's fully embedded in this Texas community.
Well, I wanted, ever since my childhood, to be seen as someone of that community. I want to represent the legacy of Jim Crow. I want to represent the people who have toiled across time in Texas and built institutions in that state. I want to be mired in it. And that's why in Texas, I happily speak to all groups in Texas. I want to be sure that people understand that I am who I am today because of that journey, because of what I learned about racism and hatred and bigotry and misogyny. I am who I am today because I learned from that, and I grew from that, and I learned how to deal with that. So to me, that's what I represent, and I represent it best being in a deeply red state like Texas, where I can go all over Texas and proclaim, you guys are really wrong. And for some incredible reason, they can tolerate that from me. And I was amazed to get a letter in the mail once from the Texas State Cemetery inviting me to be buried there. Well, no, it was an honor to be, governors, highfalutin people who have excelled in Texas are buried in the Texas State Cemetery. And so I was given a plot there that is very lovely and is really right beside a stream. It's well tended and so forth. I accept that, and I plan to be buried in the Texas State Cemetery.
A Texan forever.
Texan forever.
But you had a resilience that enabled you to not fall into that pattern of hatred and bearing only the burden of Jim Crow, but to turn it into something different. What were the life experiences or the parts of your character that your parents nurtured that enabled you to get out of Texas before you came home to Texas?
Well, I have to credit my mother, who was immeasurably wise, uneducated woman, never had any of the benefits of modern life. She bore 12 children. She was a devoted wife to my father. But what she did was to teach us how to be people. And so she would be sitting on the porch shelling peas. Do you know what that is?
I do.
You know what shelling peas is? You all don't do that anymore. Come on. But that in the old days, you didn't get them frozen and prepared. You had to take them out of the pod. And so that was a laborious task that women performed. But while she's sitting there doing her chores, she's talking to us. And she says, never think of yourself as being better than other people. And never think that you are not as good as others. I don't know anything better than that to live by, frankly. I'm not better than anybody else as a human being. And I don't think they're better than I am, just in terms of our pure humanity. And so she would insist on appropriate behavior in her children. So one of them was, if you go to someone's house and you're lucky to be invited to their home, and they offer you food do not partake of it. Why? Because they may need it themselves. Okay? But when people came to our house, she'd give them all our food. She was immensely generous person, which my siblings tell me I inherited that from her because they know me to do things for people who are undeserving of the things that I do. So that family environment was something. We were isolated because we couldn't associate with people in that town, but we had each other. And that bond was so incredibly strong. We are still together today. We have never, and that was the great task for me when I was going to college, was to figure out a way somehow that I could strive at places like Harvard, but still be just another member of my family among people who couldn't go to college, who couldn't finish high school. My dear sister, Nora, for example, died 2 weeks ago, and she had never been anything other than a maid for her entire life. And I wanted to make sure I was never separated from them at all, and did not take on the affectations of learned or wealthy people, and sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I wanted to make sure that I never changed enough that I was not an integral part of my family. And I know I succeeded at that because they still criticize me heavily. You know what they say, Drew?
Tell me.
They say they don't know what all the fuss is about because I'm not all that. And
should have brought them all here today.
no.
So in a sense, your mother was the first mentor.
Absolutely.
But it seems to me the lessons that you just described that she transmitted to you were sources for leadership lessons for all the different institutions that yes. you have headed and made so extraordinary.
I think that's absolutely right, because if you're standing, if you're in these places of power, it's so easy to feel that you don't matter very much. It's easy to feel that everybody else is smarter than you. But thanks to her grounding, I never let myself completely fall into that. I always had my voice, always, no matter what. I remember when I was president of Brown, and we were, as you know, meeting, the IB presidents were meeting, I would go on and on about how important it was for the Ivies not to stand apart from the rest of higher education. I've never shut down my voice ever. Some people wish I had, but I didn't. I didn't have the ability to do that because I felt singularly empowered by the circumstances of my young life. You are who you are. Embrace every part of who you are and use that. Speak to that. Show that. And that's what I always tried to do.
And that in itself is an argument for inclusion, because if you have people representing different paths and different parts, then you have a much stronger institution, entity, sector, or whatever. So the vehicle for your life turned out to be education, which then was your field. But there are a number of milestones along the way. A teacher in high school, I think, was critical to you. And then you've told me that your year at Wellesley was just so eye-opening.
Unbelievable.
Also the nurturing of a historically black college in New Orleans. Tell us a little bit about those educational milestones. Before you became a leader in education, you were a participant in its riches and diversity.
Well, first of all, my high school teacher, Miss Lilly, was a teacher of speech and drama. I was very theatrical when I was a teenager.
You've been doing a pretty good job of it here today, too, Ruth.
I was impossible, and she, my mother died as I was going into my junior year, and she saw that I needed a mother, and she stepped in and just took control and tried to help me through the last 2 years of high school. And one of the things that because I was really horrible. I mean, really horrible. So, for example, it really occurred to me that you could use knowledge as a weapon, and language as a weapon. And when I discovered that, I started using it in that way with my peers, because you can imagine I didn't fit in very well when I was a young person. I was different. And so I learned large words to intimidate people, and I would speak in very obscure ways and bring up things that could not be known by my peers, and so forth. So I had weaponized it fully, and she understood how sick that was, and so when it came to thinking about college, she was very fearful for me, because the colleges in Texas were just desegregating. Not all of them, but were just desegregating. And she knew I would never survive in a white environment in which I behaved that way. And so she said, I'm going to send you to a black college. And so she had gone to Dillard, and she convinced them to give me financial aid. And so I went to Dillard, where I continued to behave in the same way, but they were more tolerant of my sick behavior, except they saw a chance. And that is, I was called to the president's house one Saturday. I thought I was being kicked out because I had decided to boycott chapel. And I had told the administration that it was immoral for them to require chapel, because what if you're a Jew, or what if you're a Muslim, okay? And you're gonna require Protestant chapel? And they said, yes, every student. I said, then I won't go. But of course, there were no Jews or Muslims. But I felt it. I felt it so passionately. And so the president came up with a solution. They had a junior year program with Wellesley. And he called me to his house and he said, we've decided to send you to Wellesley College. That's why I got sent. So,
And that experience, you have told me, was transformative.
oh, it was wonderful. It set me on the path, of course, that I continued on. It was an amazing academic experience, and it was the first time I'd been in an environment with whites. So imagine coming from an all-black environment for all of my life, and then I landed Wellesley, which is virtually all white. They had to have a junior program because, of course, there were no blacks if they didn't bring students up from the South. But when I got there, it was thrilling because the courses were very challenging. But there's one thing that I noticed right away that I couldn't get over. And that is, there was a woman leading the college, Margaret Clapp. Oh my goodness. I had not until that moment imagined a woman being able to do something like that. I couldn't have imagined it, because I had 7 brothers and a dominant father, all of whom believed that women had a certain place, and it was certainly behind them, okay, and so forth. So in that mode, I couldn't have imagined it. And then in addition, my classes were challenging, and I had this experience in my French class where I was lost and decided I had to drop the course. So I went to my professor and said, "I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to drop the course because I'm lost." But he needed to sign my course card, and he refused. So I said, "What am I to do with that?" He said, "Just work harder." I was infuriated and disappointed in him, and that day I wanted to drop out of college. And if I'd had money to go home, I almost certainly would have dropped out of college. But I didn't have money to go home, and so I decided to work harder. And then I discovered, miraculously, that working harder enabled me to get better in the course, and I finished the course, right? Well, you know, it's amazing that the course that was going to help me in my college career ended up being the course that brought me to Harvard to get a PhD. So I tell my students all the time that failure is often the door to something extraordinary that you could not have otherwise imagined. And that certainly was the case for me with French. I thought, you know, I would run far away from French, but in fact, I learned to love it and to be one of those people who loves French culture and French attitudes and so forth. I built my whole career on that very failure. Isn't that something? But that's what we do in our profession. That's what we do. And so I often insist to my students, if you're in a class where your professor is telling you how wonderful you are, and so forth, drop it. Find a course that's challenging, one where you have to work harder, because you get a lot more out of it than coasting through something that you know very well.
I think this relates to the problems of grade inflation that have been so much, doesn't it? Yes. So life lessons that you picked up along the way through these different institutions, but you're also being exposed to the variety of American higher education, which becomes kind of the essence of your leadership ultimately as you lead a women's college, an Ivy League institution, a historically Black college. So those are so different in so many ways, and yet you have found threads that tie all of it together. What is it that is essential to American higher education that is represented in all these different venues and forms?
But again, you see, I knew something that so many people found it difficult to apprehend, and that is all this business about who matters and who doesn't, who can and who can't, who belongs and who doesn't. I knew that was a lie. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is to, in my life itself, demonstrate what a big lie it was. And so I thought I would never go very far in higher education because of my mouth, because I never lost that, right? And so I thought I would be punished for it. So one day, the provost at Princeton, where I was at the time, called me in and asked me if I would direct Afro-American Studies. And of course, my response was, "How dare you?" I said, "You don't respect Afro-American Studies. That's very clear. And you don't respect me, because what you want is a black face to lead Afro-American Studies, and you know I don't have a background in Afro-American Studies, and so this is a sham, and I won't participate in it." But I was one of very few black faces at Princeton, and so as a matter of course, they called me back and said, "Okay, Ruth, okay, what would it take for you to do it?" And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm unqualified, unquestionably the most unqualified person to do that job. But here's the thing, I cared about it. And I thought, well, maybe I should do things that I care about, even when I don't have the requisite knowledge. And so I went back with 8 demands, and I said, if you say no to one of them, I will not do it. I don't know why they didn't fire me, honestly. Really, I don't
know why you didn't have 9 demands.
But anyway, they said yes to everything. But number 1 on my list was, I want to bring to Princeton people who will show them what it's like to be in an environment where people are appreciated for the quality of their effort, the quality of their mind, and for what they can do and how they can inspire students. I want to have a chance to deliver that to Princeton. So I had a legal pad on which I wrote down a list of names of people that I thought could deliver on that. And I went down the list. The number 1 on the list was Toni Morrison. And number 2, I think, was Cornel West. Number 3 was Arnold Rampersad, and then Nell Painter, and so on. And we brought all of them to Princeton. And what I saw almost immediately was it struck me that this is something we can do in higher education. We can continue to teach people what it's really like to be in a university, right? What a real university should be. And so shortly after coming to Princeton, Toni won the Nobel Prize. And I thought Princeton was going to totally flip out after that. The Princeton president went to the ceremony where she was awarded the Nobel. They had a massive celebration at Princeton, and she became a figure. But more than that, what she brought to Princeton was this idea of this innovative idea. I said, "Toni, what do you want to do?" She said, I want to build an atelier. I said, "Well, you don't know what atelier is, but okay." And so she said, "I want to bring artists from disparate genres together to create something new on site at Princeton." And that's what she did. She created the atelier. She brought artists like Jesse Norman, Kathleen Battle, Yo-Yo Ma, and then paired them with writers and created original works. Brilliant. And then she had something else that she did. She was inspiring and terrifying at the same time. And what she did was mentor a young woman who became Mackenzie Scott. And this is the thing. Mackenzie Scott benefited so much from the presence of Toni Morrison that she's dedicated her life and her wealth to helping Black institutions and other institutions. And imagine that, all because of, this is what we do. We can bring people together to understand. It didn't work on Jeff,
with
though.
Your list.
But anyway, so that was something. And then after that, Harvard came to me, I don't know if you know this, and asked me if I would chair the visiting committee for Afro-American Studies here because the department had fallen apart. So we came and we tried to help here as well. And then we said, well, I think you've got a novel problem, probably in retaining people, but the person who could probably hold it all together is Skip Yates. Henry Rosofsky said, oh no, never. Yeah, he did. Because you see, Skip had this reputation at Duke, high-flying kind of. They'd write articles in the newspaper about his wealth and so forth. And Henry thought that would be very bad for Harvard. But then I said, well, no, Henry, you don't understand. Skip doesn't fit in North Carolina, okay? But if he comes to Harvard, he'll be just like everybody else because he has an immense ego. And he has fit in perfectly here, hasn't he? He's fit in He has been wonderful for Harvard.
He has.
And doing the same kind of thing for Harvard that, of course, Tony was able to do for. Yeah.
So, Ruth, that was one of your many services to Harvard over the years. I'm serious, it was. And I want to ask you about another one, a more recent one, which is your testimony in the affirmative action case in 2018. You were an extremely powerful and moving witness in that case. And the judgment of the court to which you testified was in our favor. It was overturned at the Supreme Court. And I wonder if you would comment on your reflections now, what are we, 3 years almost exactly from the Supreme Court decision to overturn affirmative action. What do you think as you consider that decision, and what do you prescribe or advise for how we should look forward in the wake of the elimination of affirmative action?
Well, we've now seen the follow-on from that, Civil Rights Act, we get lots of other things. So there is a pervasive agenda to which that was actually attached, and we didn't realize it, I think, at the time. And so I think today about the path that led us here. And it's a complicated story, because one of the things that we did in trying to build a nation of inclusion is we focused on particular groups to the detriment of the little poor white kid in a trailer park. What about them? So we made a mistake, is what I'm saying. And we were not inclusive enough. I think going forward, we just have to discipline ourselves not to project that we are more suffering, more deserving of largesse, more downtrodden than everybody else in the world, and therefore we deserve. I think that's not a workable narrative anymore, okay? Because malevolent forces can use that against our desire, which is, in my view, a very pure desire for us to come together and to work together and to be one nation. But it's been used very cleverly against us and against the country, and now we're seeing the result of that, the unwinding of decades of progress. And we are going to have to dig out of it in a painful way, I fear, but we will dig out of it. I'm convinced of that. It's just going to take time, and it's going to take the right people. And so in our universities, I hope we are forming the right cadre of leaders who will be able to take this on and recognize it for what it is and release us from this perilous period that we're in now.
Well, and so we come back to leadership, which is the theme of the day and your remarkable message of your life. And the perilous times we are in call for leadership more than ever. What can universities do to make sure they accomplish the task you just described? And what are the characteristics of leadership in this moment, 2026, that might be different or more complicated or harder to find or harder to nurture or easier to nurture? Is there a particular characteristic of leadership in this time that we should be attending to?
I think it's very important for leaders in higher education to evince an interest in, a love for, a generosity toward the broad spectrum of communities in this country. I think for a while we were so enamored of the elite status that we just drove that relentlessly and built up enough resentment that it's possible for demagogues to come after higher education with success. And why? Because there are enough people out there who feel wounded by what we've done, who feel left out by what we've been as institutions. We have to be capacious enough as institutions to make sure that everybody understands we are about this country. We're about building the country. We're about building opportunity for everybody. And we stand together as institutions, not this group that's better or that group that's less than. We are all in it together. And I always thought that when they came after Harvard, the thing that should have happened is every higher education institution in this country should have stood up at that moment and said, no. No. There's wonderful image in, in a film, Gandalf. Curry, where's Gandalf is in what? Lord of the Rings, okay. And so Gandalf is this magisterial figure with a white beard and a flowing gown, and he has a staff. And he stands at one point and says, plants the staff and says, "You shall not pass. Alan, that's what I want you to do, okay? You shall not pass." And I want every university president, every faculty in this country, what has happened to the faculties across this country? You let people wander in to tell you what to teach, and then you say nothing that's happening around this country. You let government come in and tell you what you have to teach and what you can't teach. You let government frame your language. What is wrong with the faculties of this nation that they are permitting that to happen without standing together as one? Because I'm convinced that if the faculties across this country do that, it cannot stand. It cannot stand. So my hope is the leadership we need now is a leadership that understands It's not about protecting your own institution right now. It's about protecting what we do. It's about protecting this venerable profession that has built so much and made this country so great. That's what it's about, okay? And I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away.
So keep at it. I don't want to stop you. It's so wonderful to hear you.
But so I think we didn't, the wonderful panel this morning. Thank you to all of you and to John, who is incredible as a leader, who is standing tall for philanthropy and showing the way and so forth. But there's one thing that I think I've always leaned into that I think is important in this moment more than ever, and that is governance. Governance. We are better right now than the country at governance. We model democratic values in universities. When we do it right, we are modeling how you can run a complicated country of difference and still move ahead. We model that on campuses. We've got to dig into, lean into governance right now. Because what are they doing in Texas? Eliminating faculty governance. Why? Because of the power that comes with governing together, arguing, reaching conclusions that you can all buy into, and moving forward together. That's why I was invited to speak at a governance, a meeting of the faculty governance groups around the state of Texas. And I got to the meeting and I said, well, where's the University of Texas? Where's the faculty governance group at the It's been eliminated by the state. But how do you come in and eliminate a faculty governance? They're doing it all over, and it's coming to someplace near you if you don't stand up and say, you shall not pass. We can do that. We can do that together.
We are just about at the end of our time, but what a wonderful set of words from Ruth to end with. You shall not pass. I think about John's summary of the morning panel with the characteristics advanced about leadership by the different panelists. And there was one that I've been thinking about a lot in the last few minutes, and that's courage. And I want to say thank you, Ruth, for your courage throughout your career. Thank you for your courage at this moment. And thank you for inspiring all of us to put our courage forward in this moment of such opportunity and crisis for higher education.
Thank you. It's been a great honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. And thank you, Drew, for that powerful and inspiring conversation. Now, Ruth, it's my honor to present you with the 2026 Radcliffe Medal, and I'll read the citation. She is an inspiring educator who both embodies and champions the power of learning to ignite the mind and expand opportunity. She is a visionary who reimagines what is possible and has the courage and the tenacity to do what is needed. She is a leader of purpose and moral clarity who challenges institutions and individuals to realize their highest potentials. Ruth J. Simmons, in admiration of your extraordinary impact and transformational leadership in higher education, I bestow upon you the Radcliffe Medal. Congratulations again, and please join me in a final round of applause for our medalist, our moderator, and our distinguished speakers. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.